It's hard to admit, but my sister, let's call her Lily, she's 23, has always been a massive attention hog. I know, it sounds toxic, but it's the truth. Ever since we hit our teens, it's like she declared war on me, battling for every scrap of our parents' affection. We were close as kids, but something changed. It was like she went out of her way to sabotage my moments. If I had a soccer game on Saturday, she'd suddenly need to have a sleepover that same night. Mom and Dad usually saw through it, thankfully, but it was exhausting. And it wasn't just the scheduling conflicts. Lily seemed to study our parents, figuring out exactly what they wanted in a daughter and morphing herself to fit that mold. The classes they wanted her to take, the friends they approved of, the constant agreement with everything they said. It was like she was following a script. Me? I wasn't about to be a carbon copy of their expectations. I did my own thing, pursued my own interests. Never anything crazy, mind you, but enough to be different from the perfect daughter Lily was playing. And yeah, it made her the favorite, even if they never explicitly said it. The worst part? It all felt so calculated, like there was a code running in her head. If I go to the art museum with Mom, affection level plus 30%. It was actually kind of creepy. She even teased me about it once, saying, "You just don't know how to play the game." Yeah, well, I wasn't trying to play a game with my own parents. As we got older, things only got worse. By the time I was 26, we barely spoke. When she moved to Europe for work, I was secretly relieved. During the pandemic, Lily got married. Of course, with travel restrictions and all, we couldn't be there in person. It sucked, but what could we do? My parents were heartbroken, and I understood. I was actually planning to propose to my girlfriend Sarah around the same time, but I held off. Didn't want to steal Lily's thunder, you know. We did the online wedding thing, congratulated them, all that jazz. After things calmed down, I finally proposed to Sarah, and we set a date for the summer of 2023. Lily was invited, naturally. It would be her first time back in the States in ages. She decided to make a real trip of it, staying with our parents for 6 months with her new husband. Work remotely, see the sights, catch up with everyone. Fair enough. Then the bombshell. She announced she was pregnant. First trimester. Everyone was thrilled, myself included. But then, the old pattern started creeping back in. Lily went into overdrive planning her baby shower, months in advance. It was like she was competing with my wedding. Trying to get Mom and Dad's input on anything wedding-related was impossible. They were too busy with Lily and her plans. And the digs she kept making about how we missed her wedding, it was classic Lily. Then came the real kicker. She set the date for her baby shower, the same day as my wedding. I lost it. We had a family meeting, and I laid it all out. How unfair it was, how she was doing the same attention-grabbing crap she'd always pulled. The only person who even remotely agreed with me was her husband. He couldn't say much with Lily shooting daggers at him, but he at least acknowledged that I'd set my date first. Lily launched into this whole spiel about how she was finally back in the country, how we hadn't even bothered to visit them. It was pure guilt-tripping, and it worked on Mom and Dad. When I asked them point blank if they thought it was fair, my dad actually said, "Well, son, Lily makes some good points. Who knows when she'll be back? Can't you reschedule?" I gave them an ultimatum. If they weren't at my wedding, they weren't my parents anymore. I went home and told Sarah everything. She was furious, and rightfully so. We couldn't reschedule the wedding. Deposits were paid, the venue was booked solid. So we went ahead without my parents. The rest of the family was outraged. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone thought Mom and Dad were dead wrong. I didn't hold back on telling people about the ultimatum either. Word got back to them, and I guess they realized I was serious. 2 days after the wedding, they showed up at our apartment. No call, no warning, just there. They started in with the congratulations, but I cut them off. Told them I was busy packing for our honeymoon and had no interest in talking. Just like I'd said, they weren't my parents anymore. Mom burst into tears. Dad tried to apologize, but I wasn't having it. Sarah witnessed the whole thing, and I think their emotional outburst got to her a little. She thought maybe, after the honeymoon, I should at least hear them out. Meanwhile, Lily hadn't said a word. From what I knew, her flight back to Europe was in a few days. Was I the asshole for cutting off my parents? Maybe. but it felt like the only way to make them understand how deeply they'd hurt me. This whole thing had opened up old wounds, brought back all the resentment I'd felt for years. It was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and they'd chosen Lily's baby shower over my wedding. How could I just let that go? Of course, things couldn't just stay quiet. Midway through our honeymoon in the Bahamas, picture white sand beaches, turquoise water, the whole 9 yards, I get a text from Lily. She blamed me for ruining Mom and Dad's lives. The audacity of this girl, I swear. I told her exactly what I thought, that it was on her for pulling her usual attention-grabbing stunt. She could have had her baby shower literally any other day. Instead, she chose to manipulate our parents into missing one of the most important days of my life. Let's just say I called her a few choice names, mostly variations on narcissist and self-absorbed, and then blocked her number. It was my honeymoon, for crying out loud. I wasn't about to let her drama poison the whole trip. I decided to put my phone away, focus on Sarah, and deal with the fallout when we got back. That meant no Reddit updates either. I needed a break from the whole mess. When we finally returned home, my extended family had blown up my Facebook and phone. Apparently, my parents were in a full-on meltdown over losing their son. Older relatives were urging me to at least go low contact, for their sake. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted Lily to apologize, at the very least, but she was back in Europe, leaving me to deal with the aftermath. Sure, plenty of people agreed she was in the wrong, but they also seemed to think it was my responsibility to fix things with Mom and Dad. Sarah, bless her heart, had initially thought I should talk to my parents after the honeymoon, but after I explained the whole history with Lily, the years of this pattern, she understood. She said it was too complex for anyone but me to decide. After everything, after I'd calmed down a bit, I started thinking maybe talking to them wouldn't be so bad, but I couldn't go back to the way things were, with Lily always getting preferential treatment. If I was going to reconnect, they needed to acknowledge they were wrong to miss my wedding. I called Mom and Dad, ready to lay it all out. My hurt, my frustration, the need for them to admit they messed up. And surprise, they hemmed and hawed around, actually saying they were wrong. It was incredibly frustrating, but also revealing. I guess I'd hoped for more, but deep down, maybe I knew they weren't capable of a genuine apology. At least I had zero guilt about cutting them off now. Then, out of the blue, Lily called. She actually apologized, said she realized she was wrong. Apparently, her husband had gotten wind of the whole situation and ripped into her for causing this rift in the family. He had more backbone than I gave him credit for. I told her I accepted her apology, but that didn't mean I was rushing to reconnect with Mom and Dad. The conversation was raw, a lot of emotion still simmering under the surface. Honestly, I was tired of being their second choice, only worthy of their attention when Lily wasn't around. No contact felt right, at least for now. Until I saw a real change in their behavior, I couldn't see myself going back to that dynamic. The whole experience had been a roller coaster. It was supposed to be about celebrating my marriage to Sarah, starting our life together. Instead, it became this whole family drama, dredging up years of resentment and hurt. Maybe someday, things would be different. Maybe my parents would finally understand the impact of their actions. But until then, I needed to focus on building my own family, with Sarah, free from the toxic patterns of the past. It's been a few months since the wedding debacle. Life with Sarah is amazing. We're settling into married life, making plans for the future. The sting of my parents' absence has dulled, replaced by a sense of peace. No more walking on eggshells. No more competing for attention. I haven't spoken to Mom or Dad since that last phone call. Every now and then, I get a pang of guilt, a whisper of doubt. But then I remember the years of feeling like an afterthought, and the guilt fades. Lily has kept her distance, which I appreciate. She seems to be focusing on her own family now, and I genuinely hope things are going well for her. Maybe someday, when the wounds have fully healed, we can rebuild our relationship, but it'll have to be on different terms. The whole experience has been a wake-up call. It forced me to confront the unhealthy dynamics in my family, to set boundaries, to prioritize my own well-being. It's been painful, but also liberating. I'm learning to let go of the need for their approval, to define my own happiness. I have a loving wife, supportive friends, and a future full of possibilities. And that's more than enough. Maybe someday my parents will reach out again with a genuine apology, a willingness to change. But until then, I'm choosing to focus on the present, on building a healthy and fulfilling life, free from the shadows of the past. Story 2. I dumped my girlfriend in the same manner that her ex did, because she is constantly bringing up how great her ex was and hasn't even recommended that I seek advice from him. About 18 months ago, during a cookout hosted by mutual acquaintances, I, 28, met my partner, 26. It was an instant connection. She was intelligent, humorous, and we had similar passions for travel and the great outdoors. We were formally dating within a few months after things developed organically. The first half year was fantastic. Together we took trips, dined at new places, and spent time with each other's loved ones. Everyone remarked on how well we matched one another, but things began to shift around the 7-month point. It started out quietly, with sporadic remarks about her ex and the way he used to respond to particular circumstances. I didn't give it much thought at first. Occasionally, people bring up previous relationships, don't they? Then, however, the comparisons increased in frequency and level of detail. She told me at supper one night that when we were organizing a weekend trip, her ex always knew just the right wine to go with every meal. She recalled how weeks before, her ex would make thorough itineraries, even when it's as easy as watching TV together. My ex had this amazing way of giving shoulder massages while we watch movies, she would go on. I make an effort to speak openly with her about how these incessant comparisons affected me. She said she was sorry and will be more careful. For almost 2 weeks, everything were better until she relapsed into the same routine. Her suggestion that I should take a cue from her ex's relationship style, however, was what really got to me. She told me that my ex had a wonderful way of expressing love one evening while we were eating dinner at her house. He adored me and would write tiny messages about it all around the flat. Perhaps you could give that a try. On another occasion, while she was staying at my house following a little argument about housework, she claimed that my ex and I had a system in which we divided up the work according to our schedules. It was a perfect success. Perhaps we ought to try his strategy. A supper with our pals was the tipping moment. Someone inquired about what we had planned for the approaching holidays. She interrupted me before I could respond. Every Christmas, my ex would surprise me with a weekend vacation, and he meticulously prepared every aspect of the event. It was an incredible tradition. Perhaps you could get some tips from him about holiday planning, she said, glancing at me. I felt very embarrassed, and our guests were uneasy. I questioned her further about her ex and their separation later that evening. She then disclosed something that put everything in perspective. After taking her to their favorite restaurant, her ex ended their 3-year relationship by growing more aloof over the course of a month. We politely informed him that he needed to move on since he had outgrown the relationship. It was the most responsible and adult way to end things, she said. I came to 2 realizations from the way she articulated it, which was a blend of adoration and lingering fondness. She wasn't over him to start, and she was unconsciously attempting to shape me into his likeness. What really impressed me, though, was how she continued to compliment his approach to ending their relationship, describing it as kind and polite. I made the decision to give her precisely what it seemed she wanted at that point. A split, similar to what her former partner had done. I meticulously planned every aspect over the course of the following few weeks, making sure to precisely emulate his methodology. I kept our schedule, but with little adjustments, and eventually booked a reservation at the restaurant that had grown to be our favorite during our relationship. I became a little more aloof, but not overtly so. Her actions over the planning stages only strengthened my choice. When I brought her flowers, she seemed to be unaware of how inappropriate her analogies were and kept on. She talked about how her ex was aware of the precise flavor she liked. She mentioned how her ex-boyfriend had learned how to prepare real Italian food while studying overseas while I prepared dinner. It seemed like you were living in a ghost's shadow. She went above and above the weekend before our scheduled meal. At a friend's engagement party, she told the gathering about her ex's proposal to his current partner for about 20 minutes. She was unable to stop raving about how imaginative and beautiful his proposal was after learning about it on social media. She continued, glaring at me. He always did have a way with grand gestures. I remained calm throughout it all. I booked a table at the fancy French restaurant we had found together 3 months into our relationship. playing the part of the tolerant lover while I worked out my plan. Like her ex, I decided on a Thursday night. She had once stated how her ex would dress for formal events, so I even made sure to dress that manner. Everything went flawlessly on the night of the meal. It was a pleasant day. We were seated at a quiet corner table at a restaurant that was not overly full, but active enough to provide background noise. She had recently been promoted at work, so she was in a terrific mood. She really began telling me about her ex's surprise party to honor her last promotion as we got situated in. After letting her finish her narrative, I grinned and remarked, "You know, hearing about your ex for all these months has been really enlightening." She was taken aback, most likely because I never brought up her past experiences explicitly, in this manner previously. "What are you saying?" "Well," I went on, keeping the cool, collected tone she had so frequently commended her ex for, "I gained a lot of knowledge about what makes a relationship worthwhile. I now have a clearer understanding of what must be done." Her expression brightened. She seemed to be hoping that this would culminate in a big gesture where I would vow to be more like her ideal ex. Really? To accept it that way is really mature of you. I often wondered whether there was anything you could learn from his methods. I now know. I cut in with ease. "You're not over him, I've discovered. I've discovered that you're attempting to use me to reestablish your friendship with him. Most significantly, I now know just how to break up with you in a way that you will value." As understanding set in, the color faded from her face. "What do you say?" "That's exactly what your ex said, and so am I. I've come to the realization that I've outgrown this partnership. And like him, I'm wrapping things up in the most responsible and adult manner you mentioned. At our preferred eatery, with a cool justification." She quickly experienced amazement, bewilderment, hurt, and finally rage on her face. She murmured, hardly raising her voice above a whisper, "This isn't funny." I answered in a level tone, "I'm not trying to be funny. What you've been complimenting me for months is precisely what I'm doing, splitting up with someone at their preferred eatery, following a time of tactful detachment and a cool, collected explanation. This is the ideal way to conclude things, isn't it?" She held her wine glass so firmly that I was afraid it might shatter. "Because I brought up my ex, you're ending our relationship." "No, you're obviously not over your ex, so I'm ending our relationship. And you've been attempting to change me into him for the whole of our relationship. The frequent analogies, the useful advice on how he would respond to circumstances, the countless tales of his flawless attributes. Neither of us is healthy as a result." "That's unfair," she objected. "All I wanted to do was foster our bond. He had some excellent advice." I interrupted you while you were doing it that moment. "You're supporting him and his strategies even now. You can't even see how your current relationship is being destroyed because you're so preoccupied with idolizing your previous one." She began to weep, but not the somber, silent sobs she had so eloquently described her ex managing. These were tears and sloppy mascara. "You're being mean," she said. "In fact, I'm being just what you requested. Calm, straightforward, and methodical. Similar to your former partner. This is the adult attitude you have commended so much, isn't it? This is very different. How? Because this time it's happening to you. Rather than being something that may be romanticized after the fact, she tried something else. Every relationship has problems they need to resolve. This is something we can resolve. Couples counseling could be something we might attempt." "Have you tried couples counseling with your ex?" Knowing the answer, I asked. "No, but I'll get over it. I would prefer to stick to the ideal breakup model you have been promoting." Our table was approached by the waiter. Seeing the tension, they hurried back. "Mine." Alex snatched up her handbag and sprang to her feet. She said, "You orchestrated this entire situation solely to harm me." "No, I intended for it to provide you with precisely what you have been extolling. Like him, I even made sure to pick Thursday night. The type of attire you mentioned he wore for formal events is what I'm wearing. He chose a nice restaurant, and so did I. Like him, I'm acting cool and collected. I'm providing you with the ideal breakup. You've covered a lot of ground. The only distinction is that you're actually going through it now rather than merely thinking back on it." That night, she bounded out of the restaurant, but it wasn't the end of it. Her actions over the course of the following few weeks made it clear to me why her ex had decided to break up with her in such a methodical manner. She began by unexpectedly visiting my apartment. Unexpected visits were probably not appreciated by your ex either. I said it the first time without going past the security chain to open the door. You kept bringing up one of his ideal boundaries, didn't you? She cautioned me that we weren't done discussing this before leaving. Then there was the hostage situation with the item. I clearly remember leaving my grandfather's old watch on my own nightstand, and she texted me to say she had discovered some of my possessions at her house. She said we should discuss things face to face like grown-ups, and that I had to come over in person to pick them up. I didn't miss the irony of her trying to control a meeting while lecturing about maturity. I texted her in response. Fascinating. Since you began comparing me to your ex, I have been keeping track of where my valuables are. At my apartment, I have dated pictures of my watch. Do you want me to call the police to help me find my misplaced belongings? The following day, the watch inexplicably showed up in my mailbox. However, her most arrogant behavior occurred at a dinner party hosted by a mutual friend. She had persuaded them to extend an invitation to both of us, not informing me that she would be present. She came with a PowerPoint presentation and a folder containing screenshots and printed pictures of us together. Yes, honestly examining our relationship and outlining every possible solution in public. She attempted to put on a relationship intervention. She had even made a plan for how we would get back in touch, which included weekly date nights where I would learn from her ex's best practices and required daily phone calls. She began her presentation, and our friends looked embarrassed. She used this as a power move. She believed that I would either have to follow her plan or appear to be the irrational one in front of a crowd. Instead, she spent 10 minutes explaining that her ex's method of ending things was the most mature and considerate way possible. I calmly pulled out my phone and played a recording from our most recent dinner together. I then played clips of her praising breakup approach on a number of other occasions, and then I played a clip of her making a lot of comparisons between me and him. I said, "Here's proof of why this relationship ended, since you seem to enjoy presentations. Now, would you like to explain to everyone why it's mature and considerate when he does it, but unacceptable when I follow the exact same approach?" She left the dinner party in tears, but her attempts at manipulation weren't over. A week later, she orchestrated what I can only describe as a bizarre recreated date scenario. She reserved the exact table at the French restaurant where I had broken up with her, and asked our mutual friends to convince me to meet them there for a group dinner. When I arrived, only she was there wearing the same dress from our first date with a slideshow ready on her tablet, comparing our relationship timeline with her previous relationships. Successful milestones. I simply turned around and left, but she followed me to the parking lot, insisting that I wasn't following the proper relationship resolution protocol that her ex had established. According to her, I was supposed to give her exactly 3 chances to fix things, because that's what happened in her previous relationship before the final breakup. Her next move was to contact my sister through social media, trying to get her to arrange a chance encounter at our family's annual barbecue. She sent my sister a detailed document titled, "Why Your Brother Needs to Follow the Proven Breakup Recovery Steps." My sister, who had heard plenty about her behavior, responded by blocking her and sending me screenshots of the conversation. The entitlement reached a new level when she created a shared calendar invite series titled Relationship Restoration Timeline and somehow got my email from a mutual friend. She scheduled daily reflection sessions and weekly improvement meetings for the next 6 months, each with detailed agendas comparing her ex's conflict resolution methods to our current situation. I responded by setting up an email filter to automatically decline all her calendar invites with a message. "Sorry, I'm busy taking tips from your ex on how to maintain boundaries post-breakup." The final straw came when she showed up at my gym. She had never been a member there and clearly signed up just to orchestrate another accidental meeting. She approached me while I was on the treadmill, armed with yet another folder of relationship improvement strategies based on her ex's workout routines and how couples should sweat together for better bonding. I stopped my workout, looked at her directly, and said loud enough for nearby people to hear, "You know what I learned from all your stories about your ex? That he was right to end things with someone who can't respect boundaries. I'm calling the gym management now to report harassment, and my next call will be to discuss a restraining order. We'd like to explain to a judge why you're stalking me with PowerPoint presentations about your ex-boyfriend habits that finally seem to break through." The color drained from her face, as she realized how her behavior might look to outsiders, especially in a legal context. She quickly left the gym, and I haven't seen her since. Though I heard through mutual friends that she's been telling people she's taking a break from dating to focus on personal growth. It's been 3 months now, and I've processed enough to see things clearly. While my method of breaking up might seem calculated, it was necessary to break through her bubble of idealized past relationships. Sometimes, the only way to show someone their toxic behavior is to let them experience it from the other side. As for me, I'm focusing on moving forward. I started dating again, and the first thing I look for now is how someone talks about their past relationships. It's amazing how much you can learn about a person from the way they handle their relationship history. And yes, I've kept all the recordings and documentation of her behavior, not to use them, but as a reminder to trust my instincts when something feels off, and future relationships